Thank you, Dean. And thank you, everyone. Super excited to be here. Thank you to the committee for welcoming me. And actually, I'm really glad to follow Cheryl. Cheryl, you did a phenomenal job. I don't know where you are right now, but Cheryl did a really great job describing kind of giving you the context of what's going on with the Milwaukee River watershed. So again, my name is Kristin Schulteis. I'm a senior project planner with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. And I'm here to just to tell you about the program that we're involved with to address climate resiliency in the agricultural community of the Milwaukee River Basin. So before I get into the details, like, well, why is a sewage district involved with agriculture? And you and Todd and Dakota gave a good, description of how they're involved with their community to address environmental issues. Well, here, same thing with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. Cheryl described a lot of things of other kinds of programs, but that the district is involved in, but I'm going to talk about one specific in which Dean had mentioned. So a little bit of introduction. So again, here we are in Milwaukee on the shores of Lake Michigan. This blue dashed line is our planning area boundary for year 2050. And per state statutes, our charge is to not only manage for wastewater, but we are to manage for floodwater, something that a lot of people aren't really aware of. And part of that is, one, of course, we have this elaborate storm sewer and wastewater sewer system. We don't want to have flooding and overwhelm our sewers, but we're also a regional government agency. And as we all know, water doesn't abide by municipal boundary line. And so being a regional government where we serve 28 municipalities and over 1.1 million customers, we're like in the best position to do watershed-wide type projects. So hydrologic context. So let's just say pointer. Oh, I'll just use my hands. So here we have 5 large watersheds. This large one is the Milwaukee River watershed, which Cheryl went into great depth with. We have the Milwaukee River in blue, the Picnic River in green, the Oak Creek River watershed in brown, and the Root River watershed in yellow. And
it's our sharing here.
oh, okay. I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
And so
we want to share.
Yeah, we do want to share. And so the Root River, we're looking at the upper reaches that flows into Racine, into Lake Michigan. But then we have 3 very large watersheds: the Milwaukee, the Menominee, there we are, and the Knickknack, all come together. So here we are. Here's one of our major water reclamation facilities right in downtown Milwaukee. And so if you look at these 3 watersheds, their confluence, their terminus is right here in downtown before they enter into Lake Michigan. And so that's a lot of land mass. And if we have a regional stormwater event, you can imagine that we're going to have a lot of flooding issues downtown Milwaukee. So here we're charged with managing for flooding, but we're at the terminus of these 3 watersheds. Well, again, this is a watershed issue, and we can't address flooding in a vacuum in downtown Milwaukee. We have to work across the watershed. And so Cheryl described one of our programs where we are removing concrete from our rivers in the urbanized areas to reconnect the hydrology. Todd and Dakota mentioned a program that they're working on is getting green infrastructure. We have a similar program where we actually have policy where we require anybody who's doing a development or a redevelopment, they are required to install green infrastructure to manage water where it falls. But there's this third program that we have, which is, here in these upper reaches of the Milwaukee River watershed, this is very rural. And the main land use is agriculture. And so we realized, well, and right now it's also undergoing a lot of pressure from development. And so we have, we have lots of experience of retrofitting stormwater type practices, but we also know that what nature does, we can't, as best as we try, we cannot replicate that. So why should we destroy those natural hydric features in the first place? That includes wetlands, floodplains, hydric soils, woodlands, and of course shorelines. Let's preserve those sites that are already doing the work. And so what we're doing is essentially doing floodwater management through land conservation. And about almost 25 years ago, we started this through a program what we call green scenes, and where we make we do feasible acquisitions or land conservation easements on these types of lands to preserve in perpetuity these hydric features. To date, we have over 5,700 acres in that program. The majority of them are land conservation easements, but we do own about 2,300 acres. So when we're looking up in this area, though, however, a lot of those target audiences are farmers, and those farmers with green scenes, we would have to take that farmland out of production. Obviously, that's not what the farmers want to do. So in about 2014, 2015, we realized we needed to find a program into how can we work with those farmers. And that's where we found the NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is part of the USDA. They have a program for agricultural land easements. And then this starts our whole journey with the NRCS and watershed collaboration. So Cheryl, again, really set up a lot of what's going on with the Milwaukee River watershed. And what we see, for the district, what's important to us is flooding. But we have a lot of partners across this watershed who also have concerns and regulatory and just for public health. So we want water quality. We have the Milwaukee River TMDL. We have several 9 key element plans. All the counties have done evaluations. We want long-term protection of the land, habitat, weather resiliency, and supporting our farming community. And there's one thing I really want to say here is that, yes, we want long-term protection of the land, for habitat and for farmland, but I really see that as part of preparation for climate change. Where are we getting our food from 50 to 100 years from now? Are we still getting it from California? Are we still getting it from Chile? I don't really know. But when I look at the climate models, it seems like the climate for Wisconsin is going to become more and more optimal for farming. And we're going to have longer growing seasons. And southeastern Wisconsin, we've got some of the best soils in the state for farming. So and in my mind, for especially having these large metropolitan areas, maybe we should be preserving that farmland for food that we're going to need for our future generations. I don't know what that's going to exactly look like, but it just seems like something that we should be preparing for. And so climate resiliency is a watershed issue, but I think these, and I say resource concern, that's NRCS speak. But that is something that we're seeing across the whole watershed. And then when we were looking at agricultural land easements and all these other elements of concern for the watershed, we realized the NRCS had this program called the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or RCPP for short. That really provided the framework for all of us stakeholders across the watershed to come together and work on these resource concerns. And it is a separate program that the NRCS started in the 2014 Farm Bill, which brings all these different elements of all their programs together. And the beauty is that it allows the local stakeholders to really drive what the goals are for the agricultural work that are being done. So here we get to leverage federal NRCS dollars and technical assistance with local governments, private and nonprofit funding. We get to build stakeholder capacity and technical assistance, develop develop education and outreach, so establish farmer-to-farmer networks, producer-led watershed groups, which Tony's going to get into more detail after me. They have a phenomenal group in Dodge County, establish on-farm demonstrations, conduct research to inform practices and outcomes, and again, recognize that this is a real watershed effort. All of this with federal funding that we can all specify for the Milwaukee River watershed. And then that's where this partnership really came from. So MMSD, we serve as the lead partner on the proposal to NRCS for this work. And then the whole partnership that comes together, we have Fond du Lac, Ozaki, Sheboygan, and Washington County Land and Water Departments, 2 municipalities, Grafton and Cedarburg, who have an adaptive management plan as part of their permitting with the state to address phosphorus. And so through that, what they're doing is they're providing financial incentives to farmers to adopt conservation practices. We have 2 producer-led watershed groups, Cedar Creek Farmers and Ozaki County Clean Farm Families. Actually, a 3rd producer-led watershed group, a grazing network, was started by Ozaki County Land Trust, Cedar Lakes Conservation Foundation, and Ozaki Washington Land Trust. And this forms the core of the partnership on the proposal to NRCS. But NRCS, I mean, they're part of this. And we work on a regular basis with staff from the state area and field offices. And then that's just the core group. We still have others that are involved. And so other funders, Fund for Lake Michigan, have been a huge partner in the work, not only for funding a soil and economic study, but also helping to fund some of the producer-led watershed groups and municipalities. NIFWIF National Fish and Wildlife Federation Foundation helped with staffing. And then Sand County, In-Depth Agronomy, and UW-Madison are also partnering this. And so when I look at all this, we have sometimes 50 to 55 people working on this project at any one time. So what are some of the examples of the activities that we do, some of the programming? One is called land management, land rental. That is RCPP speak. What many people familiar with NRCS programs would be familiar with is EQIP. So there's the land management portion of it, which is where the NRCS will provide technical assistance and financial assistance for implementing that practice. But the other thing that's really sweet about the RCPP is they have what's called the land rental component, where they will provide additional financial incentive to that producer during the establishment period of that practice. And for instance, our RCPP, we're really focusing on grass-based practices to address phosphorus runoff. Well, for like the practices that I have up here, they take a few years to establish. And so, and especially before that producer will see the return on investment. So with having that rental, we are helping reduce the financial risk of that and reducing that barrier for producers to adopt these conservation practices, because we're getting them through those first few years where they do not see that return on the investment. And what I'm hearing from district conservationists and from the counties and from folks like Glacierland, RC&D, the land rental has been a huge selling point for landowners and producers to adopt conservation. And so here's some examples of pollinator planting up in the far corner, a harvestable field border. So instead of planting right up to the edge of a waterway, there's a 30-foot buffer right there. The one in the lower corner is managed grazing. This was conventionally tilled. And then we have a contract with a new and beginning farmer where they turned it into managed, planted it for grazing. Again, grazing, it usually takes 2 to 3 years before a producer sees that return on investment. Having that land rental option, we saw 5 to 6 contracts in that first application, because this really helps, especially new and beginning farmers, to finally adopt these kind of practices. So when we pull the numbers, we're finding to date we have about over 26,000 pounds of phosphorus loading reduction from all the practices that have been implemented. And with all of our partners, NRCS, the counties, producer-led watershed groups, they have been working with folks for about putting together over 15,000 acres of planning. That's just a lot of leverage, everybody coming together to do this. Another activity that programming is entity held easements. This is something that MMSD, Cedar Lakes Conservation Foundation are working on, is to preserve farmland. You know, for MMSD, again, this picture is just phenomenal. This is a 300-acre easement, Cedar Creek going right through it. And this allows us to preserve these kind of natural features, but at the same time, we're also preserving the surrounding farmland. To date, with this particular SPP, we have over 1,500 acres protected and another 200 acres are in application. And then I should say the string that is attached with these easements is that we require the farmer to work with NRCS and enter into conservation programs. So what the NRCS will do is work with that producer, look at their operation and determine what practices can they improve, or what things can they do on their field to improve that will address resource concerns. Research. The research that we're doing is a soil health and economic study to measure soil properties and the economic output of fields transitioning from convention to conservation. And this was really done out of feedback from farmers. They wanted to know this information. We have many who have great anecdotal observations or evidence saying, you know, for soil health, year 3, year 5, that's when I'm really seeing the difference. That's when I'm really seeing the soil respond. But we don't have the hard data for it to show it. And so that is what we have entered in. We're teaming with the NRCS soil science teams and with in-depth agronomy to take, do in-field observations, but also send samples to the laboratory to see what can we actually find. And we're doing this over 8 fields. As you can see, that's what these orange dots are on the map. All different kinds of operations, all different kinds of farmers with different levels of experience implementing conservation. And here we're now in 4 years of doing this analysis of the study, and we're this wet aggregate stability, which is a great indicator of soil health. All but one of the fields have a significant, statistically significant improvement in wet aggregate stability. And that's exactly what we want to see, because that shows that this test to me is, accumulates the effect of the biological, the chemical, and the physical interactions in the soil. And here then, when aggregates in the soil are stable for rain events, then you have good soil structure, you have good microbiological content, and you have good infiltration. And that's, you know, that's showing that we're becoming resilient for climate. The other part of this is an economic study that UW-Madison is leading. Another thing that we keep hearing from producers is, well, I really see the return on investment again 2 to 3 years later. And we also hear from producers, well, I tried this 1 year, it didn't work, I stopped. And so now we're trying to get that hard data for those folks who really respond to the economics. So that, yeah, and I think this is what we're seeing, is that those first few years, you might not make a profit on that field, but year 4, 5, 6, and everything else, that's when it flourishes. But we want to get that on paper so that for those who want to adopt, but are not willing to take that risk, they can see that this is pretty consistent across these farms in your watershed, and therefore they can plan for it. So if they don't see that return on investment in the first year, they know, actually, I should wait until 3 and 4, and I should really stick it through, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is to, again, reduce that barrier to adopting conservation. And then education and outreach is another big program element of our RCPP. We're doing over 200 site visits with landowners and producers every year. And what I love about what's come together with this, with our watershed partnership, is now we have NRCS and county staff visiting farmers together. And they're able to then, it's not just about the RCPP. They're looking at that operation and saying, okay, these are the things that you can do, providing that technical assistance, but now they're able to layer county programs and NRCS programs. It doesn't necessarily need to be an RCPP fund, come out of the RCPP fund, but really respond to it. And the level of communication is just phenomenal. We have added and sustained 8 staff members between NRCS and the counties. 2 producer-led watershed groups, I should say 3, and 1 demo farm network are very critical for getting that outreach and education out to farmers. It's really farmer to farmer. That's where it really lies for getting other farmers to be interested in conservation. And what I love about these groups is they're tweaking and trying things all the time. And they're talking about their equipment, how they tweak their equipment to do no-tilling, or what are the things that they learned to really get it set to be able to no-till drill, or all the lessons that are learned. That's what other farmers are going to respond to. They're not going to respond to me. They're going to respond to other farmers. And so to me, they are super critical for other farmers to be interested and to maybe want to take that leap into conservation. 15 field days per year and 47 historically underserved producers enrolled in our programs. And most of those folks are new and beginning farmers. Again, really lowering that financial barrier to enter into farming. And as many of you know, farmers are aging out. We need new farmers to come in, and they need that support network to make that happen. And then finally, what I really should say, this partnership, we hold quarterly meetings, and that's kind of like the unspoken success of this watershed collaborative. We'll have 25 to over 30 people of just our stakeholders, of our partners, showing up for these meetings, and we're talking constantly. What's everybody doing? Sharing resources, sharing ideas, and the 4 counties and the NRCS have really come together. And now, for instance, a couple of the counties come together, and now they're finally getting around to addressing horse manure. Or they put together with the NRCS, they're all showing up at some of the agronomic cooperatives like Helena, Adele, and Country Visions to talk about conservation and all the resources. And so that really wouldn't have happened without this partnership and without the framework of the RCPP. So this is my second to last slide. It's something I want to pull together here. So why have Classic? That's one of the funding pools that comes out of how you can apply for the RCPP. It's the Classic, where the NRCS is really involved, or the AFA Alternative Funding Agreement, where the NRCS isn't as involved. We went with Classic. The NRCS field offices have way too many established relationships with everyone to not have them be directly involved on a day-to-day basis. So we're actually on our second RCPP. And I just want to say, if you consider this, our first one was with the 2014 Farm Bill. This has kind of laid the groundwork. Now that hindsight, now that I have hindsight, right? It took a lot just to establish 2 farmer groups and a demo farm network. And, let's see if we can get easements. And is anybody interested in, in a land management contract? I don't know, and that's kind of what it really was. And look at this, 6 field days. Over 5 years, they completed 6 field days, where now they're doing 15 a year. And so I think what hindsight is it really took us a while to get everything off the ground and to have that patience with it. And then we took all the lessons learned from our first RCPP, and now we're in our current RCPP, and actually we're in the last year of it. And so now we're like, all right, let's really increase it. Let's do 1,500 acres. And let's try to see if we get 9,000 acres of planned land management, right? And we we went through all of our land management funding in 2 years. It was so successful. But that's because we were slowly getting the ball rolling. I should say, in our first RCPP, the NRCS provided about 2 million in funding. And the partnership, we provided 7 million in funding and technical assistance. In our current one, they bumped it up to 7.5 million from NRCS, and the partners provided about 11 million. And so again, with the successes of the first Farm Bill, NRCS said, okay, you guys got rolling, we'll continue to increase it. And we also took, again, really this time now are focusing on perennial grasses. We added this land rental element. We targeted historically underserved, and we added a research element. You know, we just slowly kept building, and that's perfectly fine. And that's all I've got. Thank you. Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the land rental. So I understand part of it, but I'd like to get a better grasp on what you're doing. In McHenry County, about 80% of our farmland is not owned by the farmers farming it.
Yeah.
So the lack of ownership is one of the big barriers to participation.
Yeah.
And if a contract's 3 years or a lease is 3 years, if they do invest it, and that it goes to somebody else 4 years later, then that investment's gone. So how is your rental working? It sounds like you're paying for the rental, so that helps younger farmers move in.
Yeah.
But that doesn't do anything with that the short-term leases. Just can you talk a little bit more about that and how that might work?
Sure.
Alleviate that one barrier.
Yeah, I'll address that. So the question is, you know, one of the barriers for farmers to adopt conservation is that, of course, many are also leasing land in addition to owning their own land. And did you say Lake County?
McHenry County.
McHenry County, a lot of farmers are actually, the majority of the land that they're farming is leased. And how is that a barrier for conservation adoption in the land, and how does the land rental help? It's an issue. It's an issue. I'm just gonna be frank, because just for the very reasons that you said, you know, am I gonna still have this lease 5 years, 10 years from now? Why should I invest in all this conservation? And to be honest, I do think the land rental does reduce that barrier, because they know that they're gonna, all their costs that are involved in it, they're gonna recoup that back. And so it is helpful, but it's still, we also deal with that issue. We don't have that as much percentage of land under lease, but I just got the stop sign.
You are paying for the lease?
We're not paying for the lease. We're not paying for the lease. We're only paying that land rental rate, which is very close to what the land management equipment rate is. The land rental rate is very lucrative. It's very lucrative. I think the last ones were about, from 2 years ago, 140 an acre for a grass-based practice. Thank you.
Thank you.